Okay, so we have a regular brush right here in our Phoebe's oil dye, and I'm going to be dyeing this border on this belt to get a two-tone effect where my tooling is a different color from the border. And I generally just start at the tip and I'll start working my way back down. When you first put your brush on the leather, I like to start close to the edge in case there's excess dye that might bleed, and then you just slowly work your way up towards the edge of your tooling. Another little trick I do to help try to stabilize my hand a little bit is I will put my hand on the edge of a table or something and just kind of use it as like a pivot point, so it helps control your brush a little bit better as you go along. Yeah, so I pick the belt up and angle it back. Usually when I get close to the edge of my tooling, because the angle of your brush is just naturally, it helps get down in that little crevice right there from your bevel. If you leave it flat, I feel like a lot of times I'm not able to get up close enough to my tooling, then it might leave a little bit of a gap. So I tend to pick it up and angle it a little bit to help me get into that crevice right there. You can usually tell if it's going to bleed really bad that first stroke you make, because if you have that, that's what's going to release that dye, that first initial contact with the leather. And if it's going to bleed, it'll bleed right then. But otherwise, it should be pretty good. I feel like the oil dye, for one, leaves a more even, kind of rich looking color to it. And I don't know if that's because the oil is actually kind of putting, moisture back into the leather and not going to dry it out. Whereas sometimes an alcohol dye, if you get it too heavy or something, you run the risk of kind of drying your leather out a little bit. But mainly I use it just because I feel like I get a more like rich color and an even coat. I think with the oil dye, generally you can get away with one coat on most projects. And if you do have to go back and touch it up, it evens out really good. So, but for the most part, you can do one coat and you're pretty good, because when you actually antique it, it's gonna even that color out a little bit more. So unless you have really bad blotchy areas, most of the time the antique will kind of even that color out also. Generally, I found like it will reduce the risk of leaving streaks. If you move your brush in a circular motion, it can get a more even coat across it. A lot of times too, if I have a dauber handy, I'll dye around my tooling, and then these big open spaces, I'll just go ahead and hit with a small dauber, and that works really well too. You just want to be sure not to get too close to your tooling. And you got to remember, a lot of this, all this stuff is handmade, and when you have people that are involved, it's really easy to make mistakes. And just like with any other handmade item, there's going to be imperfections here and there. That's part of, the thing behind handmade stuff that some people actually like, is you can tell it's handmade because it's not perfect. So if I make a mistake, say for instance when I'm coloring something, and really in general, you have to kind of assess the degree of the mistake, whether it's just a real minor cosmetic kind of mishap, but no one's gonna see, or it doesn't affect anything in a major way at all, or that antique will cover up, then you can kind of proceed on and finish it out and see where it ends up. But ultimately, if you make a mistake that damages the integrity of the belt or the project, whatever it is you're making, or that the customer is going to notice and they're not going to be happy with, then you're really you're at a point where you got to kind of cut your losses and redo the project. That's happened many times, just because if you have a standard that you want to put out there, you got to try to do everything you can to make sure you're living up to that. If you put out there that you make really nice items or high quality items and you're putting out stuff that's subpar, people are going to notice and you're going to know. I mean, that's my philosophy on it, is if I say something and, you know, I have a certain standard of quality control, so to speak, then I'm going to do everything I can to make sure, you know, that when it goes out the door, it meets that standard. And if it doesn't, then it's not going out the door. And once people catch on to that, and you know, you've built a reputation on that, you know, that's going to ultimately lead to the success of your business in the end.